Great, yeah. So to get started, I think it would be great to understand how you came to work on the design systems team at Salesforce.
Yeah, so that's actually a pretty funny story. My wife moved to the US to work at Apple, and so she's American, but we lived in London for a while. And I thought I might as well follow the wife. And I came to the Valley to just visit her and started talking to a lot of people here just about, what they were doing and how was life in the Valley. And for lunch one day, I meet with Gina and Steph, and they're talking to me about this thing they've been working on called the Lightning Design System. It was very early stages at this point, nothing too crazy in production, but it was very, very promising. And so I saw what they were looking at in terms of vision and in terms of infrastructure as well, and it was awesome. So I did not see Salesforce as a UX-minded enterprise before, and that totally changed my mind on how Salesforce is capable of doing UX at scale. And I thought I'd love to be on that team, and so they were. It actually came to be as a discussion during lunch where they were like, "Wait, so you're moving to the Valley? That means you're going to be looking for a job at some point." And it was very natural and a really good fit. And yeah, so I've been there for about a year and a half now.
Great, great. And when you first joined the design systems team, what was the bulk of your work focused upon? Were you helping to expand the design system, or was it focused on maintenance?
So in the beginning, I was working a little bit on the CSS and on the SaaS architecture, but I quickly saw that a lot of the travel knowledge that they had accumulated over the past few months needed a little bit of crystallization, and so a little bit of automation. A lot of the pull requests and the code reviews revolves around nitty-gritty details of the code, and it was definitely a lot of time that was spent on looking at stuff that could be automated. So I quickly started, looking at opportunities to improve the process, such as just basic things like linting, or how can we better at continuous deployment, releasing, versioning schemes, all the little things that were getting in the way of shipping really good CSS in the first place.
Gotcha. And when you joined the team, what was the structure of the design systems team like in terms of how everybody was organized and the number of people?
Yeah, so it was very multidisciplinary. The manager was a designer. His name was Chris. He was awesome, and he left short after I joined, but he was a glue between the design systems team and the rest of the company, definitely. So he was playing the role of the interface between us and the rest of the company. Then there was Steph, who was the lead, and she's still the lead, by the way, on the CSS architecture. Brandon, lots of CSS, huge background as a creative director, and just really good at churning code, just building a lot of components. And then there was Gina, who was more on the design and evangelization side, and the kind of tokens, the whole thinking behind how we can integrate with design at scale. And so Tan, graphic designer, amazing graphic designer, who came up with a lot of the icons. They're all bespoke, tailor-made for Salesforce, and he was the guy behind it. And I joined as a more technical, kind of DevOpsy sort of guy after that.
Gotcha. When you first joined the team at Salesforce, what were some of the biggest challenges that you were facing on the design systems team?
Right. Actually, following up on the last question, I forgot a few key members, and I feel bad for it, so I'm just going to finish up. Adam Putinsky, who's been since the kind of like the quite far, almost like since the beginning, I guess, who's been working on Theo as well. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a great tool for exporting design tokens. We can talk about this later. And then he's been one of the forces behind the code and infrastructure of the website, but also a lot of DevOpsy and tooling stuff. And so to go back to the challenges, yeah. Challenges were, I would see them more as good opportunities, but for most of them. But the biggest challenge in a company like a large company like Salesforce is definitely to try to have great processes that are really fast and really efficient, while being part of a greater organization which itself has its own processes, its own way of doing things that has been going on for the past 11 years. 18 years now. So yeah, that's for me, that's the biggest challenge, because looking at the big picture and all the processes of all the teams that are going to consume the design system and trying to fit with that is really, really challenging to me.
And what were some of those processes that you had to either modify or completely kind of rebuild from the ground up?
Yeah, so unfortunately, not everyone is using NPM and just Git in general. So internally, we have a lot of processes that revolve around our release cycle, which is 3 main releases a year. And when you want to be releasing on a daily basis in terms of design systems so that you can catch errors and regressions as quickly as possible, it doesn't necessarily fit with that greater goal of delivering major features to customers 3 times a year. So an example that I think Gina likes to take as well is people keep asking us, hey, I want an icon for my new feature. And so it takes a little bit of time for us to build it and to ship it in the design system. But then the greater question is, how do we make sure it gets to production? And what is the process through which designers and engineers can sit together and know where is my icon right now? Is it accessible in 1 release ahead of us, 2 releases ahead of us? Because I don't know if you're familiar with our release schedule, but we're working on 2 to 3 releases at the same time. And so knowing where all the assets are and what is available to you in the code is the type of challenges we were looking at. So on my side, what I managed to do is to automate as much as possible on our side of the platform. Now we're still trying to find ways to kind of have a smooth transfer from the ideation to the user, and it's still not there. There's a lot to do still, but that's the current stuff we're looking at.
Got it. And at Salesforce right now, where would you say the assets, the sort of source of truth lives for those assets? Is it within the Lightning Design System, or is it like is it plugged into something external, like all those assets are in GitHub and people get it?
Right. So the design system is a collection of multiple GitHub repositories itself, and so we have 1 source of truth in the end, which is, it's a single source of truth. We have an internal portal where all the developers internally and all the designers can go and collect the resources. And then if you're more of a graphic designer or a UX designer, you don't necessarily want to go to the design system to collect everything. So we're beta testing an internal tooling right now around this as well, where we'd have something like a desktop app that would integrate really well with Sketch and with other software, so that you don't have to go to a web page every time you want to, look for an illustration, look for designer assets such as icons most of the time. Yeah, so I guess it's multiple sources of truth, but we're trying to find also points of convergence where we could automate most of it, such as again, icons is a big deal. Yeah, so that's where we're at right now.
Got it. And in the 2 years since you've joined the design systems team, how would you say that the Lightning Design System has grown and evolved the most?
Definitely in terms of components. Um, when I arrived, we mostly had utility classes and forms, um, basic components. And now we're seeing really, really massive, really complicated components with accessibility baked in and performance in mind. So I think high quality components was definitely the thing that was the most demanded across the company. We have um, multiple dozens of Scrum teams working on features at the same time, so they're really demanding and they want stuff and fast. So that's the area where we've been growing the most. And now we're looking at other areas of improvement as well, such as design guidelines, uh, and building better documentation in general. Yeah. And also, I'd like to say I've been there for a year and a half, not 2 years. I don't know if it matters, but
Right.
in terms of life cycle, yeah.
Got it. And you mentioned, so improving documentation is one of the goals that you have. Could you expand on that a little bit? In what ways are you hoping to make the documentation in Salesforce Lightning better than it currently is?
Yeah. So one of the most important things in the design system is not necessarily the self-service side of it. It's also understanding the thinking behind each design decision that was made. And sometimes one component is going to encompass so many design decisions at once. And so having some sort of clear guidelines on how to use it is great, and also why this component was built like this and what was the thinking is also something we're looking at. Um, Explaining some of the research findings directly close to the components or close to at least the design patterns that led to building these components the way it is. Accessibility as well. And as you probably noticed, we don't include JavaScript on the design system, so we need to include clear guidelines for JavaScript developers on how to implement the design system components across multiple frameworks, and like what is the keyboard interaction behind each pattern, what is the way, I don't know, a date picker should work. If you take the HTML and CSS, it's not going to work out of the box. So how do you put all these things together with some JavaScript to add some behavior on top? And so really good documentation is key to scaling that kind of best practices at scale. For a place like Salesforce, it really matters a lot.
Right. And over the course of the Salesforce Lightning Design System's sort of evolution, how are updates and requests for changes to the core design system handled? So, for instance, when I talked to Joe Preston at Intuit, he mentioned that they have a pretty formal process where you fill out like a brief and they review it almost as like a little mini design project, seeing what are sort of the goals in terms of the change to the design system. What does that process look like at Salesforce among all your the different stakeholders that you work with?
Yeah, so the public side of it is that you can simply go to the open source project and open an issue with a feature request. So that's the kind of the visible part of the iceberg, because internally we have a slightly different process where I don't know if it's very formalized at this point. I know we have different channels, and we are trying to funnel everything through the same person, which then can direct the request to the different people. I'd say that it comes 50% from designers who are working on the platform, and 50% from feature teams who would really like this little thing that they've been working on, and it's not in the design system, and they really like it to be in there. So it really depends. Sometimes it's more before something is shipped. Sometimes it's after something is shipped. I don't know if there's I'm not sure there's a really formal process. I'd have to check with my team on that.
Got it. And with the design system that you guys are currently working on, what are some of the the goals that you have for the future evolution and development of the design system, at this current point in time?
I don't know if I can talk much about this because there's a lot that's going to happen in the next few weeks, and I don't want to spoil spoil it for everyone. But things we're working on are definitely, again, improving documentation. That's a continuing effort on our side. Improving the collaboration model so that external and internal people, even outside of the design systems team, can add documentation themselves or add components even. We're looking into that right now. Not just small features or small tweaks, but whole features, whole new components, whole new parts of the website. And what else? Regression testing is a big deal for us. We're trying to improve the regression testing so that if you're contributing, you're not breaking other people's stuff. And because we have more than 500 components and states, it's crucial that we have good testing behind it so that we limit the side effects. And in general, we keep looking at our architecture. There's a lot of stuff going on that side, and you're going to see that in the next few weeks if you're careful about what we're going to be releasing. So I'm pretty excited about that. I wish I could say more, but yeah.
No, that's great. And with the design system that you guys have right now, is your update and release schedule quite common given the scale of the affected products, or is it kind of dialed back and it's not something that you guys update, every day or weekly?
So the way we release right now is that we have internal releases that are essentially happening every time there's a commit. And so we're pushing that to a staging area, let's say. And that staging area gets approved at some point. Like we have a lot of regression testing happening there. And so every time somebody is opening a pull request, there's a lot of testing happening. Every time there's something merged into master, it's pushed to our internal documentation side. And once every week or 2 weeks, we do releases to production. It's not public yet. And then, how do I say it? Essentially, what's happening is that we're always working one release ahead of what's public, what's available to the public. So, for example, if I push a commit right now, it's going to go into the next release. As soon as I tag it, I give it a version like I don't know, 2.3.0 beta 7. We're going to hand that to a team that's handling all the CSS and asset management on the real big product. And then we can also spread it to our teams who are using NPM simply. So there's a lot of ways for us to push our changes and to release it. But yeah, so and then when we release to the public, it's about 3 times a year. And then there's patch releases when there's like a really big thing that needs to be fixed in production that's impacting our customers and developers on the outside. So it's kind of a weird release process where we have to be in sync. We have to really be mindful of how teams are working internally, and we have to fit to that process. And we wish we could release more often, and I know Salesforce is doing more work on continuous deployment, continuous integration, and better release management. So hopefully one day, pushing a commit will actually send it to the customer directly instead of having to wait 3 to 6 months.
Right. And of course, that's certainly understandable given the scope of products that are affected, and also the fact that there's also, it's not just the Salesforce tool, but Lightning also affects the toolkits that other developers are using to build like apps for Salesforce. And so it's a very sort of complex ecosystem that you guys are working in.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's super complex.
Yeah, sounds like it. What would you say, on a daily basis in your work, what you find to be sort of the most challenging aspect of working in the design system?
It's a good question. I think um, the fact that again it's a big company and there's a lot of processes going on, and it's not always easy to be super agile in that kind of way. Yeah, I think for somebody who's like me, who's been working in a kind of a developer anarchy type of workplace before, working in a very um, organized place like Salesforce can be a little bit challenging, where it's not just YOLO, let's put some fixes and let's see what customers think. No, there's a real schedule behind it. Um, there's a lot of thoughts put also on the events that we're giving and how our developer marketing team can um, uh, show how to use our product. We have a ton of training material as well on our training platform. So every time we do a tweak, we have to be mindful of, is that going to impact the way people learn about the design system? Um, so yeah, I think that's the most challenging, having this huge amount of information applied to small details like how are we doing CSS, how are we releasing CSS. All these little things need to take all of that into account, and yeah.
Gotcha. And with with the Salesforce Lightning Design System, what benefits have you seen come out of having that design system in place from your time at Salesforce? Some of the folks I've spoken with, for instance, have mentioned improved design consistency, improved efficiency, and just faster release schedules. I'm wondering if those same sort of benefits you've seen also play out.
Yeah, so one of the huge benefits has been to spread the best practices that have been put into the design system. One thing is clear is that you can't hire experts on every team. It's impossible. We couldn't hire 70 front-end experts and put one per team. That's impossible. So seeing the quality of the front end increase at scale has been a huge win. We couldn't have hoped better with, like, seriously, without the design system, I can't even imagine how much time would have been spent trying to recreate the same patterns over and over across all of our teams, and also with the type of quality we're expecting from them. So that's been one of the wins. And more recently, we've seen a few really interesting wins. One of them is that really close to a major release last year, we decided to make huge changes to our navigation. And what would have been, I would say, months to change, took 1 or 2 sprints. And that was a huge win. And it demonstrated just changing colors and changing a few things across multiple teams in just a few CSS changes proved to management and to executives that there's huge value in that design system. And another thing is that we've decreased so as we roll out the design system, we can also remove custom CSS from production. And as this is happening, we see the amount of CSS served to our customer go down, which is great. It's a really good win for us. It's just less things to download for our customers, so faster pages.
Right. Is there a set of metrics that the design systems team looks at to evaluate the success of certain updates, or even of the design system overall? I know you mentioned you guys have seen some benefits, right, of less custom CSS being rolled out and faster releases. Is that something that is sort of constantly monitored and reviewed with different updates?
Yeah, absolutely. So we look at that constantly. And another thing we look at is how much of each main screen of our application is using the design system. So we're doing nice visuals for the execs to understand where there's a header, it's all the design system. There's the page header, again, all the design system. And then as you see down, you go down the page, a few things start to break out where, so we paint some areas in green on a nice slide deck. They like, execs like a good presentation. And so we take a screenshot, we paint some green where it's the design system, and we start painting some red where it's not using the design system. And so we're showing them, you know, at this point last year, this is where we were at, you know, it's all red. And all of a sudden you look at the new page, it's all green. And they know that thanks to that, in the future, if we do design changes such as changing the content density, changing colors, making accessibility tweaks, teams won't have to go back to their code, and you don't have to ask 70 teams to change that little bit of markup on the dropdown. It's just all in one place, and so they see the kind of instead of technical debt, it's like we're making a bet on the future, and like we're taking a loan on the how do you put it? I can't remember. I've read some sort of metaphor around technical debt, but you can also do the inverse and like make a technical investment, and I think that's one of those.
Got it. And since you've joined the team at Salesforce, what would you say are some lessons that you sort of learned the hard way there, just from trial and error working with the design systems team?
Good question. So a few things that I've personally encountered have mostly to do with, again, the overall process and thinking you can change everything on day one.
Right.
And things have a reason why they're running a certain way. And it's good to challenge them, but it's also good to understand why they're here in the first place, so that you can tackle the correct parts of the process and not spend energy where it's not needed. Other things, yeah, support is really hard. We get a lot of support requests from our open source, but also from internal customers, from so many different sources, and it's really hard to keep track of everything and to be consistent in your support strategy. And that's something we're only starting to scratch the surface of, but I think we didn't really have any processes in place, and if somebody was going on a holiday, a full channel of support was just not cared for like 2 weeks. And then customers don't like that. So that's one of the things that we've learned, that support is really important. And as you're building a product, you need to embed support in your overall strategy. That's part of building a product. So yeah, that's a few of the challenges we've learned. And I mean, it's been lots of really good wins mostly. It's hard to see challenges. I see them more as little hurdles that we've had along the way, but there's not anything that was like, you know, a huge realization of, oh my God, why did we do this? There's one thing. Documentation is really important, not only the external documentation, but in the code. And looking at your own code 6 months later, especially when it comes to CSS, it's kind of hard. You want to document your kind of weird decisions in your code, in your CSS, because you're going to have to go back to it, and at some point you'll be like, what was I thinking? And then you don't dare touching it again, and then you're like, you know, you have to keep that code in for like months and months because you're afraid it might break somebody's implementation. And so document your CSS a lot.
Right. And you know, what's interesting is Nathan Curtis, I know, has mentioned that working on a design system is kind of like working on a product that is serving multiple products. Would you say that, given your experience at Salesforce, that this is similar to the experience of yourself and maybe even the team there, given your process?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think Salesforce is the pinnacle of that quote. I think that Nathan Curtis totally nailed it on this article, and it's exactly what the Salesforce Design Systems team is doing. It's definitely building a product, a set of tools around it, a set of contribution guidelines. You know, it's a really fully fledged product. I think we're more than 20 people working on this right now. So it's it is definitely that.
Wow, and it's 20 people. They're all full time, all dedicated to just the Lightning Design System.
So there's multiple teams. There's a team that's more looking after the CSS and the release process, more UX engineering based. There's a team who's building prototypes that then can inform the design system. And there's a team that's more on the creative side, and I think there's another team which is essentially looking after the patterns and the overall design strategy and the more lower level, as in what are the really deep principles that drive each piece of the interface. So all the teams are not necessarily working 100% on the design system, and their work kind of overlaps at some point. But yeah, we have a team who's mostly caring for building the website, whereas another team is going to be building more, I don't know, icons or, you know. But total, it's around 20, 25, I would say.
Got it. And my last question here, which I've asked all of the people that I've spoken to so far, is if you could sit down for a few minutes with somebody who's about to start and build their design system for their company, what would be some of the most critical advice that you would want to convey to them?
Yeah, so I've thought about this a lot, and actually a lot of companies ask me this. I would say start small, skunk works type of project. That's what a lot of people are doing. And then get buy-in as fast as possible. It's really, really important to get executive buy-in, because if it doesn't come from the top, I don't think it's going to work. And to me, that's the hardest part of building a design system in a company. It's to tailor that narrative to your business problem, and then deliver something that follows that narrative. I think it's really, really the crucial point, and really hard to do, because developers are not necessarily good salespeople. And yeah, that's definitely hard. So finding the allies at the company that can sell that thing. Actually, at Salesforce, that's what happened as well, where I think it all started with people like Gina, who had the vision, who had the ideas, and told that vision to somebody who could speak to even higher instances. And so that worked out, because the design system got funding and actually could build a team around it. And that it wouldn't have happened if executive buy-in was not part of the game.
Got it. Yeah, that's very relevant to the conversations I've had with other folks, where they sort of mention the same insight, which is that selling a design system is sometimes almost as complex and difficult as it is to take the first steps actually building one, because of what you mentioned with the fact that sort of that evangelization is not always natural to people who work on design systems, who may come from a more technical background, and coming up with a story and figuring out like what are the core benefits that we can convey to different types of people so that they can all see the benefit in this, is definitely an obstacle that a lot of people face when they're about to take on as large a task as building out a design system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess just as a final follow-up to that, what would you say is sort of the narrative that you have heard at Salesforce in terms of the value of the design system that you guys have? Is there a sort of charter or some sort of unified value proposition that exists for the design system?
That's a good question. I don't know. I haven't seen the briefs, the initial briefs of how it was sold to management. But I know some of the pieces that definitely made it, get funded are to do around design tokens, because it started really small with design tokens, and then as soon as multiple products were using the design tokens, it became clear that there was a huge impact in terms of having a very limited set of blue colors, not just any blue color, just the brand and the action buttons and all that. And rolling the token systems out was part of the brief. That, hey, look, we've made an experiment. It's been working out. We want to extend that to even more, and we want to build it with web standards. And we think it's going to be awesome. And I wasn't there, but I know that was part of the proposition.
Got it. Great. Yeah, that was the last question that I had. Kaelig, thank you so much. Just a lot of great information, and it's always nice to kind of lift the hood on how design is done at different companies, especially at the scale of Salesforce. I think you guys are almost I would say one of the few companies that are so far along the design maturity spectrum that you have, this complex design system that requires so much just effort put into it and investment in it. Yeah, it's great to learn about that whole journey with you guys.
Yeah, and stay tuned for some interesting releases and cool stuff that's going to happen in the next few weeks. I don't know when this video is going to get released, but there's going to be some cool stuff around.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll include links to, of course, the Salesforce design system in the article that we actually publish, and of course also just some of the writing that you and folks on the team have published around design systems, because it's great stuff. Some of it is sort of in the design systems canon in a way, right? Like right up there with what Nathan Curtis has said, because there's very few companies that are doing this at such a public scale as Salesforce and Intuit, and those other large organizations.
All right. Thank you so much, Jerry.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kaelig.
All right. Cheers.
See ya.